Ahora vamos a tratar un nuevo bloquecito que
We are now going to talk about a specific theme that we have titled Enemies and Allies, and we can add political fronts because we want to speak extensively about political fronts. Remember Tsarist Russia at the end of the 19th century. What was the immediate goal of the revolutionary movement at that time? What was what the people desired so strongly? Well, the people, the revolutionary, the Bolshevik party, wanted to get rid of Tsarism. The immediate goal was to overthrow Tsarism. In February 1917, thanks to the uprising of the Soviet of Workers and Soldiers and the participation of the bourgeois forces, Tsarism was overthrown. Thanks to the coming together of those two large opposition forces, the Tsar was defeated. A new conjuncture was opened, just as I said previously. The provisional government, on one hand, representing the bourgeois forces, and on the other, there were the Soviets of workers and peasants. There was a dual power situation. Who was the most immediate enemy in these circumstances? The provisional government became the most immediate enemy because the people's great anxiety was for peace and that government continued the war. At that time it was evident that the enemy which must be destroyed was the provisional government. And the slogan which the Bolshevik raised was, "Down with the provisional government." Before continuing, I want to remind you that the revolutionaries in Russia wanted transformation of the society, the suppression of exploitation. They wanted a non-capitalist society, a society which would defeat feudal and bourgeois power. A socialist society, that was the strategical goal for Bolsheviks party. And the main obstacle which prevented them from reaching that goal was Tsarism. So the main enemy in the first stage of the revolutionaries of the revolution was Tsarism. In the second stage of the revolution it was the provisional government of Kerensky. And take notice, Bolsheviks employed two tactics for their struggle against the government, the provisional government. The first tactic was education, consciousness raising, and not raising the slogan "Down with the provisional government" until the point at which the provisional government was unmasked. That was the first tactic. Once the provisional government showed its true colors and reinitiate the war, then the tactic was to raise the slogan "Down with the provisional government" and organize the people to overthrow it.
En el caso de Cuba, ¿cuál era el enemigo?
In the case of Cuba, what was the strategic enemy? The strategic enemy of the movement to transform that society into a society free from exploitation, that is to say, in a socialist society, was North American imperialism, Cuban landowners and bourgeoisie. These were the strategic enemy of the revolutionaries. But the most immediate enemy was the regime of Batista. Batista was the principal obstacle, the one that blockaded the revolutionary advance. It is very important to determine what is the principal obstacle, because clearly Batista was overthrown thanks to the skill of leadership of Fidel Castro. He understood that he has to be very flexible in order to bring together all the sectors of Cuban society which had contradictions with Batista. And among those sectors, all these were bourgeois sectors. Also there were the bourgeois sectors of the middle classes that were unhappy with the way that Batista was governing, etc. The art of politics is that of determining exactly who is the most immediate enemy and in defining the most immediate enemy, also to define the way to struggle against that enemy in accordance with the state of mind of the people. Part of the intelligence of Fidel Castro was in his understanding that the armed struggle could not be launched until the electoral route was shown to have been exhausted. The assault of the Moncada barrack was a gesture that catapulted him into public view. But when he went to Mexico to prepare for armed struggle, knowing the Cuban people trust in the electoral way, he requested Batista call a general election. Having demonstrated his willingness to go to election, it was only when Batista refused that he organized the invasion, the arrival in the Sierra Maestra. In the case of Nicaragua, something happens very similar. There was a dictator, Somoza. What were the strategic enemies of Nicaragua people? North American imperialism, the large landowners, and the pro-imperialist bourgeoisie. And who was the immediate enemy? The immediate enemy was Somoza. The skill of the Sandinist front, of their leaders, was to unite all the internal sectors that were opposed to Somoza and to try to win extensive international support. The Sandinists would have to struggle knowing that they could suffer the intervention of the United States, and therefore they needed to win international support. In fact, they had the support of the European countries and social democratic political leaders as Andrés Pérez from Venezuela. So the important lesson is that we have to be very skilled in defining who is the immediate enemy.